Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Dean Rosenthal. I'm the Fisheries Division Administrator located here in the Lincoln office of the Game and Parks Commission. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We did a statewide this afternoon, which I know some of you were on. This is going to cover the Southeast District in a lot more details than what we covered this afternoon. The meeting agenda is going to be introduction, and basically we have fishery staff on from a variety of areas, but we're going to concentrate, like I said, on the Southeast District here. Tony will be taking over shortly here, and then the district guys will take over from that. We'll have a Fisheries Division overview of district projects for the Southeast District here, fishing forecast for the Southeast lakes here, and then questions and answers. And the main thing on that questions and answers is this gives us an opportunity to get your input, your feedback on what we're doing, what you think we ought to do. We can't answer everything. We can't respond to everything as far as being assured that it's going to happen, but we do make an effort, and there's a number of things that have occurred over the last few years of having these meetings to where we've gotten information from anglers like yourself and have went back and been able to make some changes and improvements. So we really appreciate your input and your time in this. When you do enter questions and stuff, we're going to ask you to do it in the chat, and I'll explain how that works if you don't know. I want everybody to mute themselves and then also to stop the video, and that way we don't use up bandwidth. It's less problems as far as communicating. The chat is this button here, and when you enter it, if you have a question, start with question and then type your question. If you have a comment, start with comment. It helps those that are moderating to weed those out, and we'll be taking care of all the questions as they either come in or at the very end. But we'll make sure that we get everybody's questions taken care of. We also have a reactions button to where you can raise your hand if needed, and we'll be trying to monitor that as we go along. And with that, I'll let Tony go ahead and get started there.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Waiting for myself to be able to take control of the screen here, but I'm just going to lay a little bit of the groundwork of how our Fisheries Division functions as a whole, and that starts with the funding for our division. Our division is basically funded via user fees, and that includes fishing license sales as well as sport fish restoration program dollars. Now the sport fish restoration program involves excise taxes on fishing tackle, fishing equipment, boats, taxes on motorboat fuel, and that sort of income that is provided to all of the different state agencies, and we're able to gain a part of that funding through that Dingell-Johnson Act. We also have aquatic invasive species fees, which include our resident boater registrations that folks pay every 3 years, as well as a non-resident boat sticker, AIS sticker, that we require as well of our non-residents. And then in addition to some of those base funds, we rely heavily on public and private partnerships and collaborations with a lot of different entities, as well as other grant opportunities. So our fishery structure, or division structure, is our main sections are our fisheries management, fisheries production, which is our hatchery system, and our fisheries research. Our fisheries management is basically, you'll hear from the Southeast District tonight. We have 4 districts that are positioned throughout the state that take care of our fisheries management. A lot of the things that that this group of individuals in this section do are fish population surveys to basically index and monitor the fish population out there. And then by using those surveys, they implement different management techniques to help manage the fishery, whether that's regulation changes like length and bag limits, or different stocking regimes, implementing different stocking recommendations, sometimes complete fish renovations, and aquatic habitat enhancements are a major part of that. Speaking of aquatic habitat, our aquatic habitat program is housed within our fisheries management section. It is a nationally recognized program that started back in 1997 with an aquatic habitat stamp that's part of the fishing license. And those dollars are earmarked for projects specifically to enhance habitat within our lakes, reservoirs, and streams. We've conducted a number of large projects that wouldn't have been able to be completed without these funds. And these funds are directly from you, the anglers. We also have angler access program and a boating access program that uses federal dollars to, once again, kind of like the Sport Fish Dingell-Johnson Act, it utilizes these types of dollars to enhance and improve and maintain boating facilities at our public water bodies. Our aquatic invasive species program is also housed in the management section, as well as our private waters program. Within the production section, we have 5 different hatcheries, and they implement a lot of different techniques to help us raise fish and distribute fish to a lot of our public water bodies. And then the third tier of our structure is our fisheries research, where we coordinate statewide investigations on lakes, reservoirs, rivers, and streams to help guide management. And in this section, we have our rivers and streams program that deals with both warm water and cool water streams and fisheries. Our Missouri River program, who focuses a lot on our native fish community, especially the pallid sturgeon. And then we also have individuals that work closely with data management and data analysis within our research section. Let's see here. So that we have a couple of other areas within our fisheries division that are important parts of our division as well, and that's our aquatic education program. Larry is a one-man show for our agency. However, he relies heavily on volunteers to help out with programs and even run programs. So we are very grateful for a lot of those folks out there that may be listening today that really help the capacity of our aquatic education, because really this is a major component of getting these resources out to kids and adults and families alike. Larry participates and puts on a lot of different community fishing events, larger events like Carporama, and all kinds of things as far as education, even in the schools. And then we have our outreach program, who's another one-man show with help from others within our division and even within our agency. Daryl Bauer does a lot to produce material to get out to the anglers, whether that's through blog posts, responding and being active within social media, producing things in publications like Nebraska Land Magazine, and even within newspaper articles in the Journal Star and other places. So trying to get as much information out there to our anglers as possible through Daryl and some of his resources. So that's kind of how we function as a division. We do rely on, and we are have great collaborations with other divisions within our agency, like our Parks Division, Wildlife Division, Law Enforcement, and all of our divisions to help really the fisheries and really fulfill our mission of benefiting aquatic aquatic resources for the long-term health. And with that, that basically concludes my portion, and I'm going to turn it over to our guys in the district to tell us a little bit more about the specific happenings in the southeast part of the state.
You're on mute, Jeff.
I'm sorry, I'm back. I'm Jeff Jackson. I am the Southeast District Fisheries Supervisor for the Southeast. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of the area that we manage, which is about from Omaha over to York, down to the Kansas border. And we have about 5% of the surface water, but about over 65% of the state's population. So most of our reservoirs are usually characterized as being pretty high use, and we also have the most regulated fisheries in the state. Within that area, we have about 120 water bodies. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is all the reservoirs and sand pits in the southeast are man-made. And the closest example we have to a natural lake would be Carter Lake. That's been modified pretty considerably. So being high use reservoirs, we also have some aquatic invasive species that come with managing high use waters. And a lot of these AIS species can be in many forms. Fish such as white perch, common carp. The plant over on the screen is called Eurasian milfoil, rusty crayfish, zebra mussels, which you've probably heard quite a bit about in the southeast. And we currently have zebra mussels in the Missouri River, off at Base Lake, possibly Glen Cunningham, but we've done some work there, which I'm going to talk about a little later. And we had some positive veliger samples that came back that Iowa took at Carter Lake. So that's definitely a possibility. We just haven't confirmed that with any adults yet. We hire an AIS tech that helps us throughout the summer. And one of his primary responsibilities is to sample for veligers, especially at our priority water bodies along the Missouri River, Kansas border, and some of our high use reservoirs around the Lincoln area. So with that, I just kind of want to highlight that it's really important to make sure your boats are clean, drained, and dry. That'll really help us prevent the spread of these. So since zebra mussels was kind of on the topic, Glen Cunningham was drawn down in 2018 to kill the zebra mussels, and then we additionally renovated the fishery at the same time. We also did a renovation of the boat ramp and dock facilities, and while the reservoir was drawn down, we did some maintenance on some underwater shoals and then added some cedar trees on the east and south side of the reservoir with the help of some of the bass clubs. The outlet structure was closed last year, and the current water level is down about 7 feet there. And we've done some initial stockings of largemouth bass, bluegill, channel catfish, and some adult white bass in 2020. And in 2021, we're scheduled to stock black crappie, sawguy, and channel catfish. So we're going to continue monitoring for zebra mussels. We've been doing that the past 2 years and have not confirmed any veligers or adults in the system yet. And looking at possibly an opening date around the midsummer timeframe. Standing Bear Reservoir is another project in our district. We're looking at a possible drawdown after Labor Day. We do have to finish the permitting on that system before we can complete that. With that, we're also looking at improving some angler access on the north side, adding some underwater shoals and cedar trees. And then in the picture, you can kind of describe what describes what we're looking at in the boat ramp area. We're going to make it a double wide boat ramp, provide some protection to the boat ramp, and also add a kayak canoe launch. And with that, we'd probably be doing a renovation this fall, and then restocking with largemouth bass and bluegill would start in 2022. And we're also looking at moving the trout stocking. We currently stock at Standing Bear to the WP1, which will be located south of Flanagan Reservoir, and that's in the design phase right now. Big Elk and Portal are two new Omaha reservoirs being built, and they're being built by the Happy Missouri River NRD. The Nebraska Game Parks is providing sport fish funds at a rate of about $500,000, and that's being matched by the NRD. Construction began in the fall of 2018, and it's scheduled to start filling in the spring. And at that time, we should be able to start stocking with yellow perch and smallmouth bass. The fishing regulations that are in place are a largemouth bass 12-inch maximum length limit and a daily bag limit of 2. And what we're trying to do here is keep the density low, but the size structure comprised mainly of larger individuals. And we feel like we'll get a better survival on our yellow perch stockings with that scenario. And the yellow perch will have a daily bag limit of 5 fish. And because the water level it hasn't come up yet, the opening dates are not yet determined. Wagon Train Reservoir, we're scheduled for a fall drawdown in 2021. And this is being done to complete maintenance on the sediment retention basin. Currently, that's completely filled with sediment. And at the same time, we're going to be looking at doing some maintenance work on the boat ramp and angler access areas. We're also adding some underwater shoals and vegetation barriers. And this fishery has really been impacted by common carp, white perch, and gizzard shad to the point we just felt that it was going to be best to renovate the fishery and start from scratch. So that is scheduled for 2022. This is just an update on Conestoga Reservoir. The fishery has been stocked with largemouth bass, bluegill, rock bass, channel catfish, black crappie, walleye, and tiger muskie. We did some spring trap netting and electroshocking this past spring, and it showed our bluegill are reaching about 6 inches, and we have a pretty good strong year class of 8 to 12-inch largemouth bass. So really be a good place to bring kids or families to. You can probably experience some pretty good catch rates there this next year. And then we'll be continuing to stock annually with channel catfish and every other year with tiger muskie. Flanagan has been regulated with a catch and release regulation for the past 3 years. And we put this in place just to let the fishery develop. And we're trying to get some input into the development of fishing regulations there. So we sent out an email survey to about 33,000 licensed anglers around the Omaha metro area. And we've had a response rate of about 10% so far. So one thing I just want to remind our anglers is that check the trash folder if you haven't received a survey, because sometimes it gets stuck there and then it doesn't look like you received it. But we'd really like that response rate up in the 15 to 20% range if possible. So this is just an overview of some of the responses that we've got so far. Northern pike looks like we have the highest rate at about 40% of our anglers would like to see a catch and release regulation on northern pike. It is fairly evenly split between the statewide and a slot or a minimum length limit there. The survey on largemouth bass, I'm kind of surprised by this, but quite a few of our anglers, or at least the majority, supported a slot or a minimum length limit. Basically, what we proposed there was harvesting some small fish to benefit the, to provide a higher number or higher percentage of largemouth bass in the population. Channel catfish, I guess I'm not real surprised by this. There's kind of a split between a statewide reg and a slot. I think we proposed like a 36-inch minimum for channel catfish, but also we had 18% of our anglers actually support a catch and release regulation. So I don't think we can completely ignore that, as it's still a significant portion of our channel catfish anglers. And then for our crappie and bluegill, this one really surprised me that quite a few of our anglers are supporting a maximum length limit where you'd be allowed to harvest for crappie fish under 10 inches, but you'd have to release all fish larger than 10 inches. And the same with bluegill, only that was you'd have to release all of your fish that were larger than 8 inches for bluegill. And that's kind of a surprise that we have quite a few anglers that would prefer us to manage for some larger panfish.
You're muted too, Aaron. There we go. Thank you, Matthew. I was saying I'm Aaron Blank. I'm a biologist here in the Southeast District, and I'm going to give a little bit of an update on our advanced fingerling walleye and saugeye stocking evaluation. If you guys have been to the public meetings the past few years, you've probably seen a little bit of this, but we're going to have a lot of new faces. And so first, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background. Most of our walleye fisheries in the state of Nebraska are out in our larger irrigation reservoirs in western Nebraska. But as Tony said, our population base is here in eastern Nebraska. Walleye are always popular sport fish. It seems like no matter where they're at, and Nebraska's no exception. And so the goal has always been to provide some walleye fisheries close to home. And so we've tried a lot of things in the last 20 years, and we're just going to go over a little bit of the history here. So some of our previous walleye stocking evaluations, as you guys all understand, we don't have any natural recruitment, or little to no natural recruitment in our lakes here in the southeast part of the state. We've done some OTC, which is we mark some fish as they get stocked, and we look at that population and see the contribution of those fish. And what it's told us is we see little to no recruitment. Another thing that has a big influence on our walleye stockings is the presence or absence of largemouth bass. Essentially, what we found out is largemouth bass, when they're at high densities, will consume fingerling walleyes. And so stocking fingerling walleyes, which are 2 to 3 inches or 1 to 2 inches, we haven't seen great results. However, on the other side of things, in our poor water quality, where we have low densities of bass, East Twin is one example, we've been able to produce pretty good amount of walleye where they get through at least that first bottleneck of predation of largemouth bass. Another way that we've been able to use fingerling walleyes pretty successfully is after renovations, when we don't have an established bass population already in there. We can stock our fingerling walleyes and bass at the same time, and we get a big boom essentially of that first year, but continued stocking of those fingerling walleyes hasn't produced much. And finally, we've learned through a bunch of different stocking strategies is our 8 to 10 inch fish, our advanced fingerlings, have produced the best results on our return of what we're putting in. So a lot of this, as I said, it started out as a way to bring walleye closer to home in the southeast part of the state here. So when we look at this, our irrigation and power reservoir, or reservoirs out west, from the mid 90s to the late 2000s, we averaged about 12 fish per gill net.
Have Dad get it when you.
In our southeast flood control reservoirs, we were just around 4 fish per gill net. So the whole point of this is to boost our walleye populations. And we'd like to hit around 8 to 10 fish per net. I don't know if we're going to ever match a walleye fishery like Calamus in East Twin or Yankee Hill, but the goal is to provide some walleye so anglers aren't having to travel quite as far. So we've stocked since 2015, we've been stocking 13 reservoirs with walleye and 7 reservoirs with advanced sawguy. And we'll talk about the sawguys here in a little bit. You can see in this 2015, when those fish were just stocked, we were just still about at our normal rate of about 4 fish per net. And you can see over time, those first 2 years, we took a pretty big jump, and it seems like we're kind of leveling out in that 8 to 10 fish per net, which is about right where I wanted to be. Looking at it on an individual lake basis here, the highlighted area would be that 8 to 10 fish mark that we've been trying to achieve. The asterisks above the lakes would represent a 2020 sample, and the other ones are 2019. And after 2019, that was 5 years, and so we're switching to more of a monitoring, so all of these lakes won't get sampled every year. But you can see we've had some lakes that are producing well above our 8 to 10 fish, and pretty consistently. Yankee Hill, Lawrence Youngman, Burchard, and Prairie Queen and Walnut Creek have consistently been above that 8 to 10. Whereas we have a few other lakes, Branched Oak, Wagon Train, that just haven't quite met the mark. And we're hoping at least the renovation at Wagon Train will boost some of that up. One thing that we have found in the last 5 to 6 years is the effect that white perch can have on some of our advanced fingerling stockings. You can see here the black bars represent our catch rates at lakes where there's little to no white perch present, whereas the gray bars indicate the catch rates at lakes where there are white perch present. You can see there's a pretty big difference, and white perch seem to have that effect on a lot of our stockings, and I just wanted to point that out here. And another question we get, and I think a lot of anglers always want to know, is once we stock these 8 to 10 inch fish, how long does it take before they get to that 15 inch legal size? And what we found through our age and growth analysis is after 1 year post stocking, it's about 7% of the fish might hit 15 inches. You can see age 2, a pretty good chunk of those fish move in, just about 60%. And by the 3rd year, about 90% of those fish are of harvestable size. And you can see too on the green, those fish range quite a bit, from 14 inches all the way to 24, 25 inches, just depending on the fish. So along with our advanced walleye, we were doing some advanced sawguy stockings. And the reason for this is there's been some research done in different states around us that sawguy tend to do better in more turbid water, shallower turbid water. And so we thought we would try these in conjunction with the walleyes just to see if we're seeing some differences on success, to kind of guide us in the future. This is a similar graph to the walleye of our saugeye catch rates, our average catch rates every year. You can see there's a pretty good dip there from 17 to 18 and 19, which is a little bit deceiving. You know, what happened was in 2018, we had significant fish kills at Olive Creek and Lone Star Reservoir, which both were producing pretty high catch rates of saugeye at the time. And so as those fisheries rebounded and our saugeye numbers that went back up, you can see in 2020, which typically is about, we see that 2-year jump. You can see we've rebounded quite a bit, and we're up to almost 12 fish per net average, which has been really great to see. Again, looking at those individual lakes that have been stocked, you can see 5 out of our 7 lakes have hit our management goal of that 8 to 10 fish per net, and a lot of them have exceeded it quite a bit. Lone Star and Iron Horse seem to be, Iron Horse has always lagged a little bit behind. Lone Star, we're hoping will make that jump and rebound after the fish kill, but so far the results haven't shown that. Around Lincoln here, Meadowlark, Olive Creek, and Pawnee will all be areas to target saugeye here in the near future. And I just threw this in just to see, we've seen a little bit of faster growth on our saugeyes. And so you can see the same thing, 4% at age 1, almost 66% of the fish at age 2. And we haven't sampled a saugeye under legal size of 15 inches by age 3. So it's been great to see. And if anybody has any questions about it, feel free to reach out too. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Matthew. Maybe.
Bear with me here a little bit of a lag here. So. Okay, there we go. Got all caught up. Sorry about that. Yeah, so as Aaron mentioned, my name is Matthew Perrian. I'm also a fisheries biologist here representing the Southeast District of Nebraska within the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, or my portion of the presentation today, is going to involve kind of our bread and butter sampling that we do on a yearly basis from kind of our standard survey data and information that we collect that is really the basis and foundation for a lot of the management decisions and things like that we make on a yearly basis. So here we go. Okay, so yep, I mentioned survey data, and so we got kind of 3 main tools among many others that we utilize for doing our standard surveys every year. And so the first one I'm going to talk a little bit about are trap nets. And so trap nets, all you avid anglers being out in a lot of the area lakes, you've probably seen some orange buoys glowing in the water, and a lot of that would be us and a lot of the work we're doing. So trap nets, they focus more on the shoreline littoral habitat. And most of the time when we're setting trap nets, we're looking primarily for the bluegill and crappie, sampling those and getting our population dynamics and abundances and lengths and things like that from our crappie and bluegill populations, which we're utilizing trap nets, which are shown in the first photo there. Another technique we use is electrofishing. And for electrofishing, we're focusing primarily on largemouth bass and flathead catfish. So some of the work we're doing at Pawnee with the blue catfish as well, and then branched oak flathead catfish. A lot of that sampling revolves around the electrofishing. And kind of the third main tool that we utilize quite a bit is gill nets. And so when you guys are out on, or guys and gals are out on a lot of the area lakes, and if you see some buoys kind of focus more off the shoreline a little bit with two of them, that's mostly gill netting is what we're doing with that. And some of the primary species we're focusing on with that are the walleye, sawguy. So a lot of that data that Aaron was just talking about was collected through the use of the gill netting, and then channel catfish as well. So once we're done using all these gears and pulling it out on the area lakes, we accrue a lot of information, and we'll dive into that a little bit now. So this is example of just a length frequency histogram. And so essentially what that is it's kind of a breakdown of just the different lengths of catfish essentially that we're sampling. And so this is just an example of flathead catfish and their length distribution. This wasn't from last year. I think this was a graph I pulled from 2019, but this is more so just kind of an example. Show everybody some of the information that we collect in regards to length frequency. And this one is going to be kind of an example of some of the data I'm going to be showing a little bit later on a couple other species. And so what this is looking at is kind of more of a breakdown of abundances. So a number of fish we caught per gill net. And so this instance, it's sawguy. And then we've got it based out on proportion too. So when you're looking at the fishing forecast data and the other publications that we put out on a yearly basis, you can look at that and just see like, okay, there's a high abundance of a certain species of fish, but maybe they're all 10 to 15 inches, whereas I'm interested more in catching 15 to 20 inches. And so you can use all that information when you're out planning your fishing trips. So the next 4 slides, I've just got 4 other species of fish that a lot of anglers like to target, and we of course manage as well. So this one to start out with is looking at bluegill, of course. And so what this graph is showing is from our 2020 sampling. So this is up-to-date information as we have in regards to bluegill sampling in the Southeast District. And I just selected the top 5 bluegill destinations that we sampled in 2020 in accordance of abundances. So how many we caught per trap net. So Duck Creek, number 12, ended up coming out on top for like the number of gill nets or number of bluegills per net. We're a little bit over 60 with those. As you can see, a high proportion is between that 6 to 8 inch range. Stagecoach was about 35. And again, we have some creeping up in that 6 to 8 inch range. Iron Horse, Olive Creek, and Burden as well are some other lakes in the district that we did pretty well on with bluegill for our sampling. Some other opportunities I got listed on the right there would be Hedgefield that has some larger bluegills in it as well. Flanagan, and then Burchard is a good lake to focus on in the district as well. Switching gears now to Crappie. So again, this is the top 5 lakes that we sampled in regards to abundance of crappies in 2020 when we're out doing our sampling. And so East Twin, that was actually on our list on the afternoon presentation that we did here as far as like destination in the Southeast to go and focus on crappies. There's a pretty good abundance out there, and a lot of those 10 to 12 inch range fish that a lot of anglers are focusing on. So then Olive Creek, Wearspan, and Wagon Train and Wanahoo were some good lakes in the district as well. And then Big Guinea, I guess I got Wanahoo labeled there too, but it made the graph. So those are some lakes to focus on for crappies in the district. Looking at our largemouth bass, and these were collected via electrofishing. So it's the number of largemouth bass that we collected per hour, just like an effort. So again, these are abundances of largemouth bass collected per hour. So Burden was kind of significantly higher than all the other lakes in the district this year. And that had some decent abundance of fish over 15 as well. And Duck Creek came in at number 2 there. So kind of Duck Creek is kind of rising to the top as far as sampling in 2020 with the bluegills too, if you all remember that one. Jenny Newman, Meadowlark, and Two Rivers as well would be good destinations for largemouth bass. And some other opportunities, Burchard Iron Horse is always a good destination. Yankee Hill, that one's pretty close to Lincoln too, as far as some people wanting to get out of town off of Denton Road there. Red Cedar, and then Walnut Creek or Flanagan as well for people living closer to Omaha. Last species I kind of want to touch on here that we focus on with our gill net surveys. So top 5 lakes in the district for abundances for channel catfish is East Twin, Pawnee, Two Rivers, Meadowlark, and Branched Oaks. Yeah, East Twin kind of coming to the top there. So people interested in crappies and catfish, East Twin were probably a good location to go and pursue both of those. And Pawnee is always a good destination for catfish as well. People looking for a little bit larger catfish could go to Wildwood. We have a catch and release regulation on channel catfish out there, but it's producing some really good results, and there's some large catfish roaming around in Wildwood. So, and yeah, so Checkland, Burchard, and then Iron Horse also has some larger fish for people, anglers to target. So lots of good places to fish in southeastern Nebraska. And with that, yeah, that kind of concludes our presentation portion of the meeting. So I think we're going to kind of transition into some question and answer portion. But this slide shows our contact information for our fishery staff in Southeast District. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us via phone or email as well if you have additional questions that don't get answered here today. So, and with that, I'll transition to question and answer. So thank you.
Hey, thanks, guys. And what we're going to do now is, as Dean mentioned at the start of the presentation, is we really value everybody attending the meeting, and we really enjoy the discussion that happens at these types of meetings and the feedback that we get from anglers. So I know there's quite a few questions rolling in, and keep them coming. Jordan Cott and Joe Spooner are doing some moderating, and they'll be taking those questions from the chat box and asking the different biologists and administrators to provide answers. So with that, you can take it away, Jordan and Joe.
So our first one has to do with Omaha and Benson Lagoon. So Larry, are you still on here? You might know a little bit about this, and Tony, you might as well. Are there any plans to do any work at Benson Park Lagoon in Omaha?
Yeah, this is Larry Pape. There, with respect to Benson Park Lagoon, there's no immediate plans to do any renovations or anything. Quite honestly, it's got a fantastic fishery for like an urban fishery. It's got a lot of little bluegill or greenside bullheads, which are great for kids to catch. And I'm particularly not interested in doing much with it because close by there, we just redid, or the city just redid Fontenelle, and it's just a fantastic fishery. It's got great bass coming on with trout. We've put bluegill in there, and it's got hybrid blue-green sunfish. So that area has a diverse mix of things that people can select. So no, I don't suspect Benson will get changed much because what it has isn't perfect for a trophy angler, but it's perfect for kids. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Larry. This is a question regarding Asian carp. I think that was inadvertently omitted during the AIS portion. If Tony or Chris or Jeff want to touch on that and potential problems with Asian carp. Have at it, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. My name is Star. I'm the Aquatic Invasive Species Program Manager. And yeah, so there are a lot of Asian carp, especially in the Southeast District. They're found in the Missouri River and also in some of the major tributaries like the Platte. So yeah, and we're currently doing a lot of research, especially with the University of Nebraska at Lincoln on distribution, and then we can find some ways to control these guys. So yeah, that's something that we're working very, very hard on. So.
Thanks, Chris. While we got you here, another AIS type question. How long does a boat need to be out of the water for zebra mussels to die? And maybe touch on both adults and larvae.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in really hot temperatures, zebra mussels can live outside of water, adults, for up to 5 days. But in cooler water temperatures, both the veligers or the larvae, and that's a life stage of the zebra mussel that's invisible to the naked eye, can live outside of it. Basically in cooler temperatures up to almost 4 weeks. So depending on the water temperatures, as long as there's some moisture, those guys can live up to 4 weeks. So yeah, it's very, very important that you guys clean, drain, dry your boat. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Jeff, I think Mark Porath is on here as well. This has to do with the project going on at Standing Bear. Is there any plans to improve the south side access at Standing Bear?
Yeah, I can probably start out. So we are on the south side. I'm guessing you mean by the boat ramp area, in that area. So the boat ramp, we're looking at least one jetty there to improve angler access, and also as a breakwater to protect the boat ramp. The main area that we're going to look at improving angler access is on the north side off of that point, where there's a turnaround there. And that's just traditionally where a lot of our anglers fish already. And this isn't really a full-blown rehab project. So we're trying to just highlight some of the real important aspects of that reservoir and try to make some improvements there.
Yeah, so in addition where we're at the boat ramp, there's also going to be a kayak launch there. I know on the floating bridge there's a ADA kayak launch, but well, we term it as a beach launch, but it'll be more of that style launch, as the paddlecraft launching is very popular at Standing Bear, and that'll be separated away from the boat ramp area, just to try to reduce conflicts on the ramp. And then over on the angler access area, we're looking at putting a bunch of angler nodes to get people out on the water and a fishing pier as well, trying to really increase angler use on that area. And then, as Jeff mentioned during the talk, doing some in-lake stuff as well. We're somewhat limited as to how much we can do, but we're gonna try to maximize as much as we possibly can. So the next one here. Will Nebraska try the product Zequinox to eradicate zebra mussels? It's worked up in the Northeast.
Yeah, so great question. It is a chemical. It's been used in a few locations. It was just used in Lake Michigan in December in some of the bays to control a cousin of the zebra mussel, the quagga mussel. Kind of long story short, it's very, very expensive. And right now, across the country, there's been less than 10 successful eradications of zebra mussels, and a couple of them have been here in Nebraska. So, right now it's always, better to be on the preventative side. So, but yeah, that is one tool in the toolbox if we get down that route. So, yeah, good question. So.
All right, Jeff, this one is for you regarding the Lake Flanagan survey. With the 10% response rate right now, how does that, how do you handle any potential bias with that And what do you expect to do with that if that's your actual response rate?
So we realize, I mean, an email survey, we're going to get responses at a higher rate from more of our avid anglers. That's inherent in that. And you just got to take it with a grain of salt when you're looking at some of those responses. If I had my way, we'd have 100% response rate, but typically what you get with an email survey is around 15%. So that it is what it is, and we're doing the best that we can with what we have. We looked at doing a mail-in survey, which would have less bias, but we were looking at about 50 grand just to do send out that survey and then do a follow-up postcard on that. And we just felt like for trying to get a response on a single regulation on a single reservoir, that just didn't justify the cost. So this was free, and you get what you get for free, I guess. But if we could get a higher response rate, it would really help us out with determining what's the best route for our anglers and what they want on that reservoir.
So Jeff, along this same regards, if any regulation changes were to occur, when might that happen?
So we would be proposing regulations probably around May or June to our administration, and then I believe Tony or Dean might need to chime in. But when does that go to our commission? The new regulation changes.
Jeff, this is Dean. If it's in regulation, it'll go in June. If it's in orders, it'll go in October. So depending on what part of with bag limits, size limits, it'll go in October.
Hey, I may chime in just a little bit on the survey bias. One thing that we do to, I guess, dampen the bias a little bit is try to rely on different forms of angler feedback. You know, this meeting in itself is a way of garnering, comments and feedback for different types of options. Just talking to the district biologist, emails, that sort of thing. So we're just trying to utilize all the different tools. Once again, like Chris was saying with zebra mussels, we're trying to utilize a lot of different tools in the toolbox to gain feedback to help us guide this management. So this email survey that the Southeast District put together is just one form of gaining some of that feedback, and we do really appreciate people taking the time to fill it out.
The next question here is a law enforcement question. I kind of scrolled through. I don't think we have anybody from law enforcement on right now. So I'll leave it up to either Tony or Dean to try to answer this. But is it possible to text or email reports of poaching or other illegal activities when sometimes you can't call because the person is too close and would hear you talking on the phone?
This is Dean. I believe most of the officers' cell phone or phone numbers that are listed in the fishing guide are their cell phone numbers. So I would believe that a text would work and probably be the quickest way.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Dean. I do think to increase your chances of getting a response, it's best to leave your name as well. Leave as many details as you possibly can. So I know Mark, are you still on? And Jeff, this has to deal with the planning of the rehab at East Twin. Could you just give an update as to where we're at on East Twin?
Jeff, you want to go? Or you want me to take it?
Go ahead, Mark. You start and I'll chime in when I need to.
Sounds good. Yeah, all of our larger aquatic habitat projects, full lake restorations, take a number of years. We start off by putting together a formal proposal of what's wrong with the reservoir and then try to figure out a way to fix it. Another thing that we do that's been very valuable is to work in the watershed with the private landowners and try to reduce any impairments, sediment, nutrients come from there. That's kind of where we're at right now. We're working with the NRD, NRCS, NDEE right now in the watershed, trying to reach out to people, figure out ways to reduce sedimentation coming in. And we're in the process of putting together a couple of demonstration sites, planning this next year that we're getting done.
And I would say we're probably 4 to 5 years out from starting a project there. Just an estimate, but it's definitely on our list, and we realize that the fishery is fairly impaired at this point, and we could do a lot for that fishery by doing a rehab on that reservoir.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Any thought about trying to maybe rebrand carp fishing to make it more attractive to anglers in general, but specifically fly fishing, as fly fishermen have taken more of a liking to carp fishing?
I can maybe touch on that a little bit. I think we have done that in a sense with the Carporama stuff and the family fishing events with Larry. And I think there is a select group of anglers that do like catching carp. I know on the second part of the question about as it deals with our carp problems too, the amount, and we touched on this in the state meeting, the amount of fish that would need to be removed to have any sort of impact on our carp problems would be a lot higher than what we would ever expect anglers to be able to catch. It might produce a little bit, but to deal with our carp problems, that's probably not a path that we would ever go down. But I do agree, there are some, and I think we've already seen it. I know in the Papio Creek in Missouri and in Omaha and in Salt Creek in Lincoln, there's starting to be a select group of carp fly fishermen. So.
Yep. Thanks, Aaron. Tony, how do white perch get introduced?
So the main route that we've seen over time is via bait. At least that's the suspected route. We've had a number of instances even where law enforcement officers have found white perch in a bait bucket at a water body that has yet to be infested. And so we know that's happening as much as we try to educate and provide outreach materials on not moving bait around, and even at lakes that don't allow live bait fish, that tends to happen. And then the issue with the white perch is once they become established in a certain water body, they become kind of the vector or the origin. So the more water bodies we have infested with those fish species, the higher potential they are to leave that lake via a bucket and find themselves somewhere else. So we stress all the time, try not to, or abide by the rules and don't move bait around, don't move live fish around. And it is a law that we cannot have individuals leave a water body with water from that water body. Just as a reminder.
It's also illegal to at several water bodies to possess live white perch. We had a couple questions asking if they could get copies of these slides. I think it was mentioned earlier that tonight's talk, including as well as all of this week's talks, will be uploaded to the Game and Parks YouTube page, which if you scroll through the chat function, the link to our YouTube page has been provided in there. So make sure you scroll up through there and follow that. They will be uploaded sometime, I would imagine, either this week or next week. Aaron, this is a good question for you regarding saugeye and or walleye stockings. So if saugeye stocking continues to go well, do you anticipating moving more towards those, and or vice versa? If the walleye stockings are going better, do you plan to move more towards those, or do you continue to see a long-term blend of the two?
Yeah, that's a good question, Shane. And, you know, that was part of this whole evaluation of this 5-year study, was to see if we're seeing any major differences between the two stockings. And as I said, right now, it appears that maybe we're seeing a little bit faster growth, but it's more on a lake by lake basis. And so we're seeing some good growth rates on walleye also in certain lakes. And if we really start to see some differences, I would see stocking changes. Right now, we got a few walleye lakes that are still continually pushing above 15 fish per net. And so we're seeing good results. Part of it too has to do with the availability of male sauger in our hatchery systems, and being able to collect enough and get enough to make those. But you know, we're always going to do what's going to be best with the resources that we got. And so that's something that we're always evaluating. That's why we took 5 years to do this instead of making just any real quick changes on any of this, and we'll continue to. But right now, it appears both are doing well. It just seems to be more on a lake to lake basis, and maybe not a species. We'll be continue to dive into it here for the next however many years it takes. So I hope that answers it a little bit. I know it was a little bit of rambling, but
that was nice. Thank you, Aaron. The next question, Mark, you can answer this one, I think, regarding engineering firms that did the design work for some of our projects that we talked about with WP 6 and 7, which are Portal and Big Elk, Standing Bear. I think Jeff mentioned Conestoga. Trying to think a couple other projects that we've done recently. Maybe just mention those firms and how we go about that.
Certainly. Thanks, Jordan. One of the things that has been really fun about the Aquatic Habitat Program is working with engineers over the last so many years to work together to try to figure out ways to solve biological problems to make fishing better and access better. So we've used a lot of firms in the state of Nebraska that are from Nebraska. Some of them are subsidiaries of big national corporations, but the vast majority of them are locally based. There's a group called FIRA out of Omaha that we use an awful lot with some of our new lakes. I believe that they were working with Jordan on Big Portal and Big Elk and Portal. We've used the Flatwater group here in Lincoln. They're a local group that have been doing a lot of work for us over the years. We use EA Engineering, we use Olson's, JEO, FHU. There's about 5 to 7 firms that have kind of made our access and habitat projects their own specialty. They're kind of a cottage industry here. So they've been actually been asked to chime in and help projects in other states as well. Jeff, did I miss any?
I think that was pretty inclusive.
The only other one, I think HDR would have been another one that we work with quite a bit, right, Mark?
Yep, you're right. You're right.
Perfect. All right. Matthew, you want to handle this one? As far as the list of lakes that are surveyed each year in southeast Nebraska, and how anglers can find that information out.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, I can dive into that a little bit. So yeah, that list is available. I guess you can go into our the fishing forecast and look at that specifically, like what lakes were sampled within the certain districts. That's something I guess I could probably just email out to if something's looking for a little bit more specifics on which water bodies to make it a little bit easier to find. But yeah, the fishing forecast is a good avenue for that as well. So yep.
And that's one thing our guys in the district take pride in, is just being available to the anglers and to the public, receiving phone calls, emails, and exchanging information that way. So feel free at any point to pick up, your fishing guide and give them a call or an email and that sort of thing. We love having those discussions.
For sure. All right, Jeff. What's the long-term vision for Branched Oak?
That is a really good question and a complex question at that. But I can take a stab at it. And Branched Oak being the diversity of recreational users there, it's not as simple as, just doing a drawdown on one of our 100, 200 acre lakes and doing a renovation on it. First of all, the lake being 1,800 acres, it's would we estimate might take $40 to $50 million to do a project on that lake that would be fairly substantial. So that would be complex in itself. So we really haven't looked that direction as far as renovating the fishery. We have been working on enhancing the fishery through some of our stockings and regulations over the years. Right now it has probably a world-class flathead catfish fishery in it. We've been doing some surveys on that and trying to get that information out, as you saw in Matthew's presentation. We've also been doing some evaluations on some of our stockings. That includes, we've looked at our wiper stockings over the years, and we've been getting some really good results in survival with doing what we call a whole over wiper stocking. So those are fish that we hold for almost a year in the hatchery and then stock them in the spring, and they're usually around 7 to 8 inches. And we've had some really good results. We're starting to see our wiper population rebound there. Our channel catfish fishery, we did some stocking there over a 5-year period where we clipped all the adipose fins on those stockings, and we saw about 80% of the population was comprised of those fish that we'd clipped. So we were able to build that channel catfish fishery back up. And if you look at the standard survey results, we're up in the top as far as our channel catfish densities there. So that's really rebounded. We were hoping to get better control of our white perch population, and we would see that if you'd start to see a lot more larger white perch in the population, and we really haven't seen a significant change in the white perch. We have seen some, but they're still comprised of a lot of small fish. So And walleye, we've stocked advanced walleyes in there at a fairly low density. We tried a large number of them a number of years ago and didn't see very good success with that. So we knocked it back a little ways, and we are seeing some survival in our walleye stockings now. So I know that's a lot of information there, but it's a complex fishery and some complex issues with the white perch and gizzard shad and common carp in there.
What about, I know we stocked the striped bass in there several years ago. Any update or word on those? Have we seen any of those?
We've not seen very many of those, just kind of disappointing. We are going to try to stock those as some holdovers again here in the near future, see if we can get a little better survival. But yeah, we're kind of disappointed with the results initially. So,
okay. Thanks, Jeff. Shift back to Matthew. Can you talk about the sampling that's been done at Prairie Queen and Walnut Creek?
Yep, yeah, I can offer just a little bit of information on both of those. So just with kind of the way 2020 went a little bit, we avoided some of the Omaha metro area lakes as far as sampling. We're just like risk assessment, but I do have some information on both lakes in 2019. And then again, kind of like what Tony was mentioning too, if John is looking for some more specifics, feel free to reach out and we can give you some more specific sampling data if you got a certain species in mind or something like that as well. But yeah, just real quick, the Prairie Queen walleye looked really good with some of those advanced stockings. We had 10 walleye per net out there at Prairie Queen. Pretty high abundances of largemouth bass as well, different length ranges, so there's still experiencing some growth. Bluegills, they're also present out there. We had about 7 catfish per gill net at Prairie Queen. And then Walnut Creek, yeah, just a little information on that. We had about 13 catfish per gill net out there as well. So that's some satisfactory numbers as far as anglers looking to target some catfish and stuff like that out at Walnut Creek as well. I know Aaron might have some more information he wants to delve into with those, but that's what I got.
Thanks, Matthew. Regarding red ear sunfish stockings, how do you determine success for that species? Or Jeff or Matthew or Aaron, any of you guys want to touch on that?
Yeah, I can touch on that. So the way it sounds, the way that question was phrased anyway, is kind of what do we look for in red ear sunfish stockings? You know, typically we're looking at the same thing we would for some of our bluegills. And just the one thing about red ears and why we've moved into them into a few different lakes is they provide a little bit of different opportunity. They can grow to larger sizes. For one thing, catch rates are typically lower than what we're going to see on bluegill. They're a deeper spawner and a lot less or a lot lower density. As for success, it's pretty similar to the bluegills in our spring trap nets. If there's red ear sunfish present in the lake, we typically run into them in our spring trap nets in April and May. And so we're still evaluating those fish, taking lengths and weights and catch rates. And so if you got any other questions on a specific lake or anything, feel free to reach out and we can get you more information. But it's pretty similar management strategy as it is to bluegill. So.
Okay. Is there anything that can be done about the algae explosion at Yankee Hill and Wildwood in the late summer?
I'll take a stab at this one again too. So I don't know. We touched on this a little bit during the state meeting this afternoon, but just being in the part of the country where we are, all of our lakes are high nutrient load, and a lot of these lakes in the salt valleys were, you know, they're 40 to 30, 40, 50 years old. And so there's been a lot of accumulation. Even when we do full-blown rehabs, there's still a lot of sediment that can't be moved out of the lake. And in that sediment is a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus. And you'll see typically in the spring, a lot of our nutrient load is in our aquatic macrophytes. And so as we have our curly leaf and coontail, sago pondweed, a lot of that stuff that starts growing in the spring, we have pretty good water quality because that nutrient load is being taken up by the macrophytes. Well, as you transition into summer and those macrophytes start to die back, and that nutrient is released again into the water. And unfortunately, in this part of the state, and you see it in a lot of lakes, and it's different every year, but a lot of that nutrient uptake is by algae. And so we end up with pretty large algal blooms, different times, different lakes, and there's ways to deal with it, but they're very expensive ways, treating it with chemical, and you'd have to stay on top of it. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's just what we have to deal with managing these lakes, you know. And Mark touched on it too on East Twin. You know, we try to be preventative on any of those aquatic rehabs to help things out, slow the water down as it's coming into the reservoir so that nutrient load doesn't reach the lake. We work in the watersheds to provide some areas where that nutrient load that can't even get into the stream, and hopefully it's used by terrestrial vegetation up along the stream line. But unfortunately, just in the part of the country we're in, it's a problem we're going to have, I think, for the future. Then we're not unique to Nebraska or unique to having algal problems.
I could probably add a little bit to that. I think Aaron covered it very, very well. A good example is that as we do the rehab projects on lakes, we try to incorporate sediment retention as part of the rehabilitation process. A great example is Wagon Train Reservoir, back done almost 20 years ago. And because we put in that sediment retention basin, it worked very well. We would still have some blooms and stuff, but didn't have HABs until about 3 or 4 years ago. Now all of a sudden we're getting HABs at Wagon Train. And the main reason is the sediment dike is now completely full. It filled up 3 or 4 years ago. So we're trying to use that tactic to address what is coming into the reservoir and handle it the best we can.
All right. Dean, this might be one for you regarding law enforcement in Douglas County, or Douglas and Sarpy County, with roughly 700,000 people over there. What consideration is being given to increase law enforcement? Rich and Dan can't possibly cover the growing number of reservoirs, and the offenders know it.
That's something that law enforcement is looking into. Actually, our chief of law enforcement figured out that if you take and map out all the different lakes in the Omaha metro area, going from basically Two Rivers on east and in through that area, it'd be the same. If you tried to hit them all, it'd be the same as driving from Omaha to Scottsbluff. That's how much area it covers and the number of lakes. So they are looking at additional law enforcement for that area. I'm not sure on the exact number, but I believe it's probably one additional at this time, but that is something that is in consideration and is in their long-term plans, which I believe will be happening before long.
Thank you, Dean. This one for the biologist is, are walleye being planned to go back into Wagon Train after the sediment retention clean out project is completed?
Yep. As for now, I think we'll try to get them going again once that lake rehab is completed. What Wagon Train has, after the previous renovation in 03, we had a really good walleye population started in there, and so we know they can do well in there. The issue, I think, has been compounded by the high abundance of white perch again, and also competing with adult gizzard shad. And now that we have common carp in there, water quality has continued to degrade. So hopefully they'll get going and do as well as they did in the late 2000s.
Next question here is the project that is being planned at Standing Bear going to add more ADA accessible features? And the short answer is yes. To expand on that, the boat ramp will be ADA. The current kayak launch off the floating bridge that the city put in is ADA accessible. We're exploring different options with that to possibly consolidate our paddlecraft launch all into one area at the boat ramp. That may or may not happen. The breakwater that's being designed at the boat launch will be ADA accessible. And then the angler access features on the northeast side of the reservoir, some of those will also be ADA accessible as well. So that kind of expands on it. So yes, there will be a definite upgrade to accessibility features around Standing Bear with this project. Next question is regarding water clarity at Wanahoo. It's been very dirty since the high waters in 2019. Do you think that's ever going to clear up? Aaron, I see you on the edge of your seat.
I can touch base with it here. So Wanahoo has a few negative things going for it. One, the sedimentation load has been pretty high, even previous to the flooding, but anybody who's been up there and has been up in the upper end can see the sediment load coming in is pretty high. However, one of the bigger issues I think we have going on is in terms of water quality is common carp infestation. And so about 4 years ago, we started seeing a few common carp in the spring during our northern pike sampling, and that population has continued to expand. And so one of the issues with common carp is they uproot a lot of aquatic macrophytes, which we're using a lot of that nutrient load, and they're constantly stirring up sediment. And so I think it'll eventually, it's a large enough reservoir. I would think, in the springtime, you're going to start seeing some of the better water quality, and hopefully it does, but it's probably not going to be like it was in 2012.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Jeff, this might be a good one for you. Is Game and Parks doing anything in particular in southeast Nebraska to protect and or promote largemouth bass populations, such as supplemental stockings or anything like that?
So, I mean, to protect our largemouth bass populations, we have a lot of 21-inch minimum lake limits around the district. That's one avenue that we do. We don't do a lot of supplemental stockings with largemouth bass. We have in a few instances. One example would be Verdon, where we saw a real high density of small bluegill and a really low bass density. And so we went back and moved some 10 to 12-inch largemouth bass, which are sometimes pretty difficult to find at the densities you need to actually restructure a fish population. But Verdon is a fairly small reservoir, and we were able to be pretty successful in that instance.
Thank you. This is one Tony and or Dean may want to look at this or address this one. Can you add a couple survey questions during the permit purchasing process? This could be a good opportunity to get some information during that process. Any thought given to that?
At this time, our permit system, any changes to it would require some extensive restructuring of the programming. And so at this time, it's not possible. We are looking to change our permit buying location or company. And hopefully at that time, that's going to allow us some additional opportunities to mine data and, obtain information a lot quicker. Whether we'd be able to add questions or not, it's doubtful at this time. I don't think that aspect has been added into the requirements of the new permit system.
Yep. Tony, has the increased popularity of ice fishing changed our approach to fish management? And if so, how?
Yeah, this is a question that was alluded to during our statewide meeting as well. And it's one of those things that we have to be cognizant of as fish managers, as technology continues to push forward and all of these different things as far as having fish vulnerable to the angler keeps advancing. So one of those things that we continue to preach and we know is happening out there is selective harvest. Teaching folks that being conservation minded and maybe keeping some fish, maybe not their full bag, and also keeping medium-sized fish rather than just the largest ones can be the best for the population. So it's one of those things that we do discuss internally, and there's many discussions going on at a region and nationwide level within fisheries managers and how we may have to deal with these technologies moving forward. So it's a great question, and it's definitely on the radar.
Sorry. Mark, you kind of addressed this on the chat, but are there any plans to deepen and or sculpt and renovate Oak Lake? On the surface, it appears a prime location right there in Lincoln, but looks can be deceiving.
You're right. Urban waters are so valuable, regardless of their size and sometimes even the quality. Oak Lake is kind of a unique situation. It was actually built on top of where the old Lincoln landfill used to be. And so we have actually thought about trying to find ways to enhance Oak Lake, with the most important thing being that you got to have deeper water to really sustain that fishery. And we're not really sure there's any way we can deepen it. That would not be either very problematic from what you're going to be digging into, or incredibly expensive. So that's why Oak Lake is kind of limited, more valuable probably as a frog pond, duck watching, things like that.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Jeff, any chance for a water body managed specifically for a carp fishery, given the interest among fly fishermen in the urban areas? This might be a good use of some lower quality lakes such as Oak Lake or some of the smaller shallow NRD water bodies.
So there are some lakes that that we haven't renovated. Oak Lake would be a perfect example. That, you know, there's carp available in there. However, they're just such an incredibly destructive species, especially in reservoir situations where they'll resuspend sediment. They're real destructive on sport fish populations. So unless a lake is deteriorated to the point that we don't see any further management action, I just don't see us managing specifically for carp in those situations. We do have some fantastic carp fishing at Branched Oak and Pawnee, and you know, enjoy those, and we realize there's some anglers out there that enjoy fishing for carp, and they're great fighting fish, but in these smaller reservoir situations, they're just incredibly destructive. So.
Tony or Dean, any chance for Red Ear to have its own master angler category rather than just being lumped in with bluegill?
That's something that we can look at. Daryl Bauer is one that deals with our master anglers and state records. And that's something we talked about earlier today as far as a database there and how we're going to manage and move forward on some of that. And I'd say that's a possibility. I can't promise anything, but I think those are some of the things we need to look at.
Very good. Here's one for all the fish heads on. Are there any publicly available resources besides the recently published Fishes of Nebraska book with information about small stream creek surveys in southeast Nebraska, with info about suckermouth minnows, stone rollers, darters, etc.? I'm assuming this is for those anglers interested in micro fishing.
I can maybe touch. I'm definitely not gonna be the world's most expert on this, but just coming from my background and working here, some of the areas, John, that you might want to look into, and maybe you already have, is getting a hold of some of the graduate students or professors over at the university we've done a lot of research on the Platte, Missouri, and some of the tributaries there. And so getting into some of that, it's probably deep into the data sheets, but they might be able to provide you some of that. As for our district in the southeast here, the most recent stream work we've done has been in the Big and Little Nemaha rivers and the Big and Little Blue rivers. And if you got any questions on specific species, I see you got a few listed, but areas or whatever, feel free to reach out to us for that information. But maybe one of your best areas to explore would be our rivers and streams, our new rivers and streams team at the Game and Parks. And we would be able to get you that information to Thad. They've done a lot more of the stream research across the state. I know they're going to be in this part of the state a little bit more this year. And so reaching out and getting some of that data, if you're looking for specifics, would probably be the best way that I could think of. I don't know if anybody else has any more info.
I was trying to pull it up on the UNL Digital Commons, but I know there's a report that's been published by Dr. Ed Peters, a professor that was at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, where a team went out and did stream inventories across the whole state, basically hit 300 different sites, replicating a study that was done back in the 1940s. And that report is published and available on UNL Digital Commons. I know I've seen it on there, so it'd be a matter of searching for that. I think it's something like the Nebraska Stream Fisheries Inventory or something. And I think Joe was going to hop on with a comment here. Joe's part of our Rivers and Streams program.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Hey, one thing I wanted to mention, I think Aaron mentioned it. Nebraska NDE will be doing biomonitoring in the Nemaha Basin this year. So we will be doing quite a few survey sites in that area. So we'll get a bunch of data coming in the Southeast District here this year. And then also, just to add on, we are working currently on a Nebraska minnow update that we'll be putting on the Game and Parks website. It's currently a work in progress, but hopefully we can get that out soon so we can get information to you guys on identification of these small minnow species.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Here's another one dealing with white perch. So if somebody catches one, what should they do with it? Should they dispose of it in the lake, throw it on the shore, or just throw them back in the water that they caught it? Tony or Chris, you guys want to, either one of you want to handle that one?
Yeah, kind of as I think it was Aaron alluding to with the common carp and having folks go out there and angle and harvest fish and try to make a dent per se in the population and help provide a solution. Anything that we do with the white perch, there's been some research done that even if you remove 90+% of the population on an annual basis, you would still be hard pressed to stay on top of the population to actually make a difference as far as their size, structure, and growth. So throwing, killing fish right as they come in the boat it might feel good, but it's not going to do anything for the population. So it's one of those things where if you want to utilize the fish, harvest it to eat or harvest it for, fertilizer or something. Yeah, great. Go ahead and do that. However, those fish do have to be dead. It's illegal to possess live white perch.
Okay. Jeff, what are the future plans for northern pike at Lake Flanagan?
Okay. I really think it's dependent on what our anglers respond back, partly to that survey that we're putting out. We want some direction from our anglers on where we're going with our northern pike fisheries. So I think we're going to continue to manage that as a northern pike fishery. Our stocking rates and frequency might be dependent on the regulation that we end up with there, but we want to continue to manage for pike, for northern pike at Flanagan. So,
okay. Dean, this one might.
Jordan, I was just gonna touch on it too. That
sorry. Yep.
I was just gonna touch on the population. We'll be out there this spring, here in the next few weeks, doing pike sampling. So,
sure. All right, Dean, this one might come back to you again with law enforcement. So if we don't have enough paid officers, why don't we use volunteers like neighborhood watches to report poachers? With cell phones, photo is pretty easy to take.
I really can't answer that question for law enforcement. That's something that I'm going to have to throw out to our law enforcement Division and see what their response is. There's lots of aspects to law enforcement that I don't know about, and I don't really want to say yes or no on it because I really don't know on that. And
Yeah.
we'll try and get back to the individuals that asked the question.
Yeah, if you wouldn't, John, if you wouldn't mind sending us an email with that so that we have your contact info. That way we can get back to you with that response. Let's see here. Are there any species we haven't seen much in the stocking reports in the past that we may see in the next few years showing up here in southeast Nebraska?
Well, Jeff kind of touched on it a little bit. We'll be seeing smallmouth bass and yellow perch going into portal and big elk this year. I think, I don't know, Jeff, if there's anything else, but I think that's about the two new unique species. Tiger muskies will be continued to be stocked into Conestoga every other year.
Yeah, and we attempted some rock bass in Conestoga last year that would have been in our stocking database, but it's kind of a unique species, and we're monitoring that to see how they're doing. It's kind of early to say what that population is going to look like, but something we're attempting, and we're interested in seeing what the results are there.
And there's a possibility of getting some more white bass into Cunningham, if I'm correct, Jeff.
So we just saw on, it just came out today about putting these Georgia cubes out in Merritt. Are there any plans to help expand this to the Omaha Lincoln area? And if so, would Game and Parks be willing to reach out to anglers to help donate time and materials to build more of these to alleviate money and time from Game and Parks staff?
Yep, and I can start on that one. We haven't built the exact Georgia cubes that that you're alluding to on Merritt, but we have done some projects on weir span with some Boy Scout groups over the years. I think we've done a couple of them every year the last couple of years. One thing about those, they are pretty labor intensive to build. We've always felt, I guess, that we're a lot more efficient at being able to move a lot of cedar trees pretty rapidly when we have a reservoir down. So we haven't done as much of that. It's certainly something that we're going to entertain in the future. And right now, one of our universities is doing a project evaluating some of those different structures, and that might help guide us in the future how much effort we might put into some of those different structures.
I'll add just a little bit to that, Jordan, as we really appreciate all of the angling groups that have helped out in the past and continue to, reach out to us saying that, hey, we got time, we got manpower to help us out, because we found that these types of collaborative projects are win-wins, just from being able to get our staff together with these angling groups to talk anything from habitat to the fish itself and the reservoirs and that sort of thing. So they're they're great projects to be a part of, and we're hoping to continue those in the future.
All right. How are the wipers at Zarinsky doing, and what's the plan in the future with them? Continue to stock them? Jeff or Aaron or Matthew?
Yeah, I can hop on there. We weren't able to get out to Zarinsky gill netting this fall. I'm guessing that'll be on the schedule for this coming fall for our gill nets, and so we'll be able to get nets in on them. Everything I've heard guys catching fish. I've seen some reports online of guys catching some through the ice even this winter. It appears that survive. They had fairly good survival on the spring stocking, and it's something that we would like to continue.
Okay. So this guy, John, catches a lot of catches a lot of stocked fish that have been stocked in the reservoir in the Papio Creek, such as wipers, pike, muskie, walleye. Is any effort given to prevent them from escaping reservoirs through the spillway, or any effort being planned to evaluate what that escapement loss is?
Yep, I can touch on this. It's a good question, John, and it's something from the beginning of the early stages of our advanced walleye stockings. It's been shown in some other states, the escapement out of reservoirs of walleye, pike, and muskie in particular. They're three species that typically go with the flow, and we're in the early stages right now of putting together a project to evaluate loss of walleyes through our reservoirs on our advanced walleyes. And so hopefully here in the next few years, we'll be tagging some walleyes and being able to get some hard numbers to see what our loss actually is on those fish. And so Iowa just had some literature that came out, a little bit different spillway structures than what we have, more of an overflow typical to Wanahoo, but they had a fairly high percentage of walleyes and muskies leaving the lake. And so once we get some of those hard numbers, we'll see if there's ways that we can prevent it if it is a problem.
All right. This is the last question I have on the list, at least for right now, but Tony, I'll let you maybe address this. Are there more lakes in southeast Nebraska that could support smallmouth bass?
Yeah, it's one of those things where smallmouth bass, along with some of these other kind of cooler water fish species, are preferred, or they're very sought after by a lot of our anglers. So we're making attempts the best we can to diversify some of our fisheries with these fish species. So like Jeff had mentioned earlier, Portal Lake and Big Elk, new reservoirs in the Omaha area. Since they have small watersheds, there's very little feeding into them as far as farm ponds and that sort of thing that could introduce competing largemouth bass. Those were great opportunities to try these fish species in to see if we can get these fisheries going. So other types of opportunities, as we look at different water bodies and potentially renovate water bodies, our sand pit type lakes at our complexes along the Platte River also provide potential opportunities for smallmouth bass fisheries as well, as we've seen happen at Two Rivers, number 5, the trout lake, where we have a sustaining smallmouth population right now, and that we hope to continue potentially after a fish renovation there. So there are opportunities, and we want to continue to listen to the anglers to help guide our management and emphasis on different fish species.
All right, we got one more that just came in. Is there plans for liberalizing the harvest regulations at Wagon Train before the drawdown? And that includes muskies.
Yeah, I can chime in on this. There are plans. It requires a declaration by our director. So all of that would have to go through a formal process to make the liberalization of regulations put into place. But we're hoping to do that at some point this spring, so that our anglers can utilize those fish that are out there. So really what that would mean would be just the rescinding of length limits. Bag limits would still be in effect. That helps our law enforcement out as far as being able to continue to patrol the area water bodies and keep track of those bag and possession limits. So there are plans for that. It isn't in place yet. We still need to go through that formal process. So stay tuned for some news releases or blogs and that sort of thing coming out of our outreach program.
I think that's all the questions that we have in the chat. I appreciate everybody's cooperation in that. I mean, that was really good participation.
I just want to say thanks for tuning in and sticking with it here. I know Tony touched base on it a little bit, but unlike I think what some people have issues or think of us, we're always willing to answer phone calls, emails, just chat in general. That's the way a lot of things have gotten done in the past, and I'm sure it'll be that way in the future. So if anybody ever has questions, concerns about specific lakes or anything, feel free to reach out to our district staff at any point. So our information's up there on the screen still. So, but just thanks again for tuning in. Really appreciate it.
Again, I'll echo what Aaron says. Thanks again. We really appreciate everybody's input. It's extremely important to us. We do listen. We cannot respond to absolutely everything that people want, but we want to do the best we can on that. And we had a great turnout tonight. A lot of people stuck around through the whole thing. I really appreciate the opportunity to listen and see what you guys have to say, your concerns. It helps us a lot as we formulate things as we move on down the line. And you guys have been a really great bunch. I really appreciate it. And want to thank you all, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.